What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Timothy Wenger, and I'm from themaneffect.com. And I'm excited today to interview and discuss with Dr. Daniel David from Men's Life Institute about the topic of addictions. Thanks for showing up. Not,
Thank you.
not just me being here, you know?
Right. Well, I appreciate it. And thank you. Um, is it hot where you're at?
No,
It's
it's
hot over
actually
here.
it's
It's
not too
Atlanta.
bad where I'm at.
So, but yeah, thank you for doing these interviews. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
I know that we have a lot of good stuff for guys to really dig into. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah. And guys, we're going to be continuing to release content, but also there's previous content as well. So just check it out on our YouTube channel or the website. So, yeah. Anyway, you ready to jump in?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. So addictions. So I'm curious, you've guided the mastermind of what we're going to talk about. And so I'm kind of curious why you wanted to touch base on the topic of addictions.
You know, I have a lot of guys who come to me usually after many relapses and a history of relapsing. It's often, I'm a therapist and I work here in Atlanta, but I'm known around some of the AA circles and things like that for working with guys who are in recovery.
Mm.
And I've worked with a few recovery programs in the Atlanta area. So when I get referrals, it's usually because I have a guy that, they'll have a guy that maybe needs more than just a 12-step program.
Uh-huh.
It might need therapy. And I've really taken the approach that you can do recovery through therapy. And I've seen some good results with it. So I thought, well, this video might be important for somebody out there who's really struggling with maybe a drug addiction or alcoholism or porn addiction or some other form of addiction. So,
okay.
I think that's why I reached out and said to you that addiction would be a really good topic for us to discuss.
What's like one instance of a client that they surprised you with how much recovery they had from an addiction just through therapy with you?
Well, let me put it this way. First of all, I have to, I'm just going to give you a general typical client so that I'm not giving any confidential information away. I have to kind of put that little disclaimer at the bottom of the screen. But typically, a guy who has come to see me might have actually, let's say he's alcohol dependent and he's had, several years of going in and out of treatment programs. There are lots of different treatment programs in the Georgia area, but also across the country. And he might have been able to put together a little while of sobriety and then go back to work and get back to the home and all of a sudden take a drink and relapse. And then I've had heroin guys who have done the same thing, guys who are on heroin and they've put together some sobriety, but they're not able to stay long in sobriety. And so they may actually be kicked out of programs, because if you're in a program, and this is sort of one of my pet peeves around some of these programs, if you are in a program and I understand the mindset behind it, it's like, well, if a guy relapses, then he's a hazard to other individuals. So I understand that, but I often think that it might be a good idea to have a level system where if someone relapses, that they're not just kicked out of programs, but they're put into a different, level of care. And then that way, they're continuously in an environment that helps them with their recovery. But a lot of these programs kick guys out. And that what happens is that, they're now, going from one program to the next, one halfway house to the next, one treatment facility to the next. And then they come to see me and they're in really bad shape because it seems as though everyone's given up on them. And I just think that it's one of those things where, the first thing I want to do is offer hope to guys and say that recovery is possible. And in my practice, I often tell guys, as long as you show up, we're not giving up here. We're going to
Yeah.
continue, even if you are in a relapse state. There's a Japanese saying, "Fall down 7 times, get back up 8."
Yeah.
And I believe in that as far as recovery is concerned. So,
I love it.
uh, that's initially where, when guys are coming to see me, that's usually where they're at, and
Yeah.
they're feeling like failures. They're feeling lots of shame. They're maybe told that they're not serious about their recovery
Hmm.
because of the relapsing. And so it's one of those things where there's a lot of sadness and pain around
Yeah.
recovery.
Yeah. So it's obvious that it's a part of your desire and empathy for men in this arena, and that seems like it's part of the motivator behind our discussion.
Absolutely.
Okay.
As you know from our conversations and a lot of our talks about men and men's issues, I've been working with men for 35 years,
Yeah.
ever since I was a young man. And, so I have a lot of compassion for men, and especially guys who find themselves on the, on the down and out in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think it's so important to um, confront and be open about issues, and to actually give people practical uh, input or advice. So I'm excited to talk about this more. Um, so in your journey of um, helping people and just being around men in the realm of addiction, what are some like core principles that you found people don't realize about addiction?
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of individuals don't realize about addiction is that, there's a pain pleasure principle that's going on in the brain.
Okay.
And, there's a neurobiology of addiction, but also there's this emotional, psychological, physiological, um, uh, pain pleasure
Mm.
programming that's going on in the body and in the brain and in the mind, if you want to separate it, but it's not really separate.
Yeah.
So, guys will do 12 step and they'll put together a lot of days or even months or years of sobriety. But
Mm.
when you really look at their lives, are they really happy? They're just sober,
Sure.
but they aren't really, they might have changed because of their sobriety. And of course that creates a new set of behaviors, which
Yeah.
is fine. But,
Yeah.
are they really taking care of those inner wounds? Are they really healing on the inside out? And that's where I struggle with a lot of 12-step based programs, is that it's all about getting a guy off the alcohol, but where's the therapy part? And 12-step programs are not meant to be therapy.
Sure.
And so I do support, and I do ask guys to go ahead and get a home group for their AA program or NA program, and maybe even a sponsor. But I also tell guys, look, your sponsor isn't your therapist, and it's not your doctor, so they shouldn't
Mhm.
be dictating to you whether or not you should be taking medication or not. They should just focus on getting you through the steps and being sober.
Mm.
So that's one of those issues that comes up when guys come to see me. They think, well, are you 12 step based? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not 12 step based. I'm more brain based in recovery,
Uh-huh.
because I think brain based recovery is important, and there are a lot of things we can do to heal our brains and help you know um, stop the addiction. So
Yeah.
um,
So, so to make sure like,
that's
I understand you correctly,
sure.
what you're saying is 12 step, it does help people quit addictions, but it maybe isn't addressing the source of the problem.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
And the real source is, we all walk through life with wounds from our past. I mean, I'm 58 years old, and I have a history. I didn't just pop in, with no history. And, that history of whatever happened to me
Uh-huh.
is,
It's part of your
going to be
story.
there. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just talking to one of my colleagues about 9/11, and I was in New York City during 9/11, so that's a part of me too. And
Hmm.
so we all have these wounds that we carry around, and for men, because we're not socialized, and society doesn't really give us a chance to express ourselves emotionally. We're often kind of shut down emotionally.
Hmm.
We bury these wounds, but there's pain there. It's just like I was telling you before the show, I got a spider bite, and it made the finger eventually look better, but there's going to be this soreness, this tenderness underneath, and it may look like it's healing up, but it's still sore. And when we have these emotional wounds, we think, well, that was 10 years ago, it shouldn't really bother me. Or I was 5 years old when this thing happened to me, and it shouldn't really bother me. But in reality, the best way to do recovery is to go deep into our unconscious mind, where everything is really buried and put away, but doesn't go away. We actually feel the pain.
Hmm.
And so, for example, if I'm out with someone and I'm talking to someone about, like, for example, 9/11 was 18 years ago, and I'm talking to them about some, let's say they tell me about their experience, I'm reliving some emotional pain too.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter how long ago that was. It doesn't matter that, if I was 5 years old during that time, if it had a significant impact on me, and and it hurt me, or made me fearful, or made me feel less than, not good enough, made me
Yeah.
feel a level of shame
Yeah.
or emotional pain, it's going to be there.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that a lot of guys medicate.
Yeah.
They don't realize it. They're medicating their pain, and when they feel, I don't feel good, so I'd rather change the feeling. They're mood altering, so they don't like the either neutral or negative feeling. So what do? They try to mood alter, and so alcohol or some other drug will change their feelings. And
Yeah.
you ask them, well, why do you need to mood alter? And they go, well, I don't like how I feel. Well, all right, where's that feeling coming from? So
Yeah.
this is the deep inner work that they need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, if you're watching, and this is kind of like your preliminary, like looking into addiction in general, I think this is a great opportunity to assess your own life and ask yourself what tools are you using to numb with, and why are you doing that? It could be alcohol, it could be video games. Like, I mean, who knows what it is in your life? But it's always the self reflection process can really reveal a lot of those previous pains, if you're willing to go there. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
You're 100% right. It's just that a lot of times we're taught, well, it's just because you're an alcoholic.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, that's the symptom, being the alcoholic, being stuck in a mode of medicating our pain. So let's really talk about the pain. Let's really
Hmm.
get deep into, okay, when did this all start? And usually I'll ask guys, and they'll say, they might tell me 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, what was going on at 12 years old? And they said, well, mom and dad were fighting all the time, and I was scared that I was going to, they were going to get divorced, or they did get divorced, and it was an ugly battle between mom and dad. And then I had to choose sides, and I felt guilty for choosing one side over the other, and then I felt shame every time I was with the parent that I didn't choose sides with. So all
Hmm.
of that emotional pain is there. It's still there. And that's why guys need to actually go there and work through that, and
Yeah.
understand how they were wounded.
Yeah. I mean, like, even things that don't even seem that traumatic too. Like, I realized I'm the youngest of four kids, and I realized in my memories of my childhood, I don't have any memories of my mom playing with me, and I have
Mm,
very few of my father because they were busy with the other kids or just surviving. And so, like, I realized that that's something that impacted me, but it's also something that I couldn't really be mad at them about because it was what it was. And so even though it didn't seem that big, it had been a big deal until I just confronted it in my own life. And then now it's a part of my past, but I've spent the time working through it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's a great example of when guys come in and they say things like what you just said.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, how's that impacting, your relationships, or how's that
Yeah.
impacting your self-esteem? And then they'll go, well, I never really thought about it, but
Yep.
I guess it does. And maybe it causes some problem with trust, or maybe
Yep.
I don't feel too close to people, and then of course, when we're not feeling good about that, and we're having a bad day at work, then we want to look for some relief. And that's where the excessive drinking or drugs or whatever,
Sure.
gaming comes in.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I think we're at a good junction point where we should jump over to your mind map.
Okay.
I feel like we've painted some good pictures of addiction, but also more of the root, the back end of what's motivating it. And so I'm going to share the screen here of the mind map you jotted down. Can you see it?
Awesome. You're really good with this technology. I would have, if I would have known that, I would have baked a better cake. I guess I would have, I would have done a better mind map.
It's all good.
But so guys come in and they get assessed over to the left, or to the right. I'm sorry. You
To
can
the
see
right.
where it says assessment, and then we really want to make sure that there's no crisis, immediate crisis or harm. If there is, then we got to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
Any suicidal or homicidal ideation, I always have to ask. So you
So
see
over
that
here.
over there. Yeah. I like that little
Okay.
red dot over there. And then you kind of go through their mental health status and make sure, okay, is this person just suffering with alcoholism, or is there some depression there, some anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
Is there, maybe an underlying personality disorder slash, mood disorder like bipolar disorder, or,
Sure.
anxiety, generalized anxiety. And then of course, do they have a history with medication, or maybe they might eventually need medication. And I know, that becomes an issue for some guys who, I don't want to take medication. And I'm like, well, you've been kind of, they come up with all of these arguments with pharmaceuticals, and I'm not a fan either, quite frankly.
Sure. Yeah.
But if it's going to help, it's going to help. And, it's like, well, is it pure? Is it safe? I'm like, well, you've been taking crack cocaine and meth,
And did you care about the quality?
yeah. Yeah. You don't care about the quality of that. Right. It's like, so it's just a little bit ironic. I say that with lots of love, guys, but come on, seriously.
Yeah.
So, we talk about medication management, and then on the other side, I think on the left side, right, it says here that, so I'll say, are you going to meetings? And then,
Mm-hmm.
you need the support of a community, which is why I think AA is very helpful, can be helpful. And, if they need a sponsor, then I encourage them to get a sponsor. Sometimes if they don't want to do.
Could you clarify real quick for the sponsor, for people who aren't aware of what AA is?
Okay.
What that works?
AA is a 12-step program. Basically, you work through the steps, and I really don't have them listed there, but you can obviously find that on Google. But there are local meetings. There are meetings everywhere in every city around the country and around the world.
Yeah.
I have businessmen who travel from Atlanta to LA, and they find a meeting. They go to a meeting there. It's a good way of helping people become accountable for their sobriety and find encouragement for their sobriety. And then a sponsor is a person who has had some time in recovery. And I really recommend two years minimum for a sponsor to have had 2 years of sobriety, so that they can, before they become a sponsor to one of my patients. So
Okay. Yeah.
it's one of those things. And a sponsor helps the individual to work through the steps.
Okay.
Okay. Of AA.
So it's a internal support system, kind of.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Sorry, I just wanted a little more
No,
context.
no, it's good. I'm glad that you asked because some guys out there may not know. Now, I will say this, and I have to be frank with everyone. AA isn't for everyone, and if you
Sure.
haven't been in an AA, it doesn't. I'm not going to. I don't make it mandatory. I think it's a good support system. But if there are other ways to find that support through family
Mm.
or group therapy or maybe a community, a religious community, that's also helpful. And I encourage that.
Yep.
Some guys, we're in the South, and some guys don't dig the God issue that AA brings up, and I totally understand that, and
Yeah.
I have lots of good suggestions for guys who may not dig the God, the God issue of AA. So I wouldn't throw it all out, but I think there are some workarounds as far as working on the God issue. So
Yeah. Yeah.
especially for guys who don't believe in any, who maybe are atheist or just agnostic or don't believe in anything, you can still do recovery and you can still get better. So I just want to encourage you guys out there.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's get back to this. What segment is next that you want to touch base on?
Okay, so you see here the assess for identity issues, and then
Okay.
so it, technically, when I work with men, I work around male identity, and as I've said in other videos, male identity is like a rudder of a ship. If
Yeah.
the rudder is broken, the ship's just going to float aimlessly. And so identity for us is how we feel about ourselves, how we envision ourselves in the world, and that is the basis of our decision making and
Yeah.
also for living our lives. So I there is an assessment that I take guys through. It's on my website. It's a self-assessment. It basically identifies 32 issues that are common for men who come into therapy, and so they usually bring that assessment into their first session after they've had a phone consultation with me. And then I'll look at that and kind of work on some plan. Okay, where is this person really wounded
Mm-hmm.
in their identity? So let's say they lack confidence. Let's say they really haven't had a good time with their career path. Maybe they don't feel like they've been successful. Maybe they have family issues. Maybe they have relationship issues. All of
Okay.
these things impact their identity. So we do a bit of an assessment there
Okay.
and begin to understand, how does this person see themselves? And usually, our mood and our feelings of self-confidence are directly impacted by how we see ourselves, that identity, that internal selfie, as I call it. So let's say now they have some issues and we identify the issues, then we go into what we call the psychodynamic level, which is, in Oxford, when I was studying there and doing my research, I did a lot of research around pain and motivation.
Okay.
And why do, we've talked about my work with gang members in New York City for 20 years. And I've always wondered why people did the things that they did or behaved in certain ways.
Uh-huh.
Addiction follows that as well. It's, there's something there. There's pain, the hurt, the wounds, the shame, and then there's a motivation to maybe get rid of the pain or medicate the pain so we can feel good. So we go into the unconscious world and we say, okay, what's hidden there? What's underneath it all? And I wrote this little quote from Carl Jung. It says, until you make the unconscious conscious, so bring the unconscious from out of the awareness into the awareness, it
Yeah.
will direct your life, and you will call it fate. It was like, well, this is the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
No, this isn't the way you are. This is the way you were conditioned to be.
Yeah.
And we might have to break that conditioning. And so then I work on these levels here with pain, motivation, and so
Shame.
shame,
Yeah.
the original wound. Okay. So I'll say, well, how do you feel about yourself right now? Well, I feel like shit. I feel worthless. I don't feel good enough. All right. Well, when did that start?
Yeah.
Well, I've always felt this way. Well,
Mm.
give me a time or a memory of your earliest memory of feeling really bad about yourself. Well, I
Yeah.
was, in sixth grade and kids were picking on me because I was overweight, right? I said, wow, that's a real pain. That's a real
Yeah.
wound. So
Yeah.
then what did they feel? They felt shame and guilt.
Yeah.
So shame is a core feeling. It's a sense of a core wound, I should say. It's a sense of being as well, and then guilt is a sense of behavior. So um, if I've made a mistake, then I feel guilty. But for shame, I feel like a mistake. All
Hmm.
right. And so for guilt, I've done something wrong, and then shame says there's something wrong with me. So shame is a much more deeper core wound. And then of course that creates beliefs. So if your father told you were stupid when you were growing up, then he wounded you, then you felt shame. He obviously knew something I didn't know.
Hmm.
And then when we felt that we couldn't do certain things, we felt guilt about that. But then we went to school and thought, well, my dad said I'm stupid, so I must be stupid. So let me it started a belief of I'm stupid, and then we just act that out, and that's where the
Yeah.
conditioning starts happening.
Yeah.
And then we have the inner critic there, as you can see, which says, well, what do I know? I don't know anything. I'm not smart enough, right?
Yeah.
And then it comes out in either the mental or the physical. So mentally, maybe I become anxious
Yeah.
and I can't study, can't read, or I get a mental block. And maybe physically I feel the anxiety in my body, or I get an ulcer, right? So these are all things that happen physically and psychologically, and then we got to cope with it. So this is where the addiction comes in. It's the maladaptive coping, so
Yeah.
we can't quiet the critic in our head, so we're going to drown him out with alcohol,
Sure.
right? Or we'll make them feel really good with whatever. And that's the problem right there.
Yeah, and on that point too, it's something that I've observed too in my interaction with men and just writing is that a lot of guys seem to flatline themselves intentionally, emotionally, so
Mm,
that they don't have to feel the negative things going on. But a repercussion of that is not feeling the positive either. You're
right,
just
right.
nothing. So
Absolutely. Like flatlining is a thing, and I've seen that as well. But what's interesting, it's kind of like you take a soda bottle, and you look at it. Let's say it's Sprite, and you can see it's a glass bottle, so you can see
uh-huh.
that it's just liquid in there. But as soon as you pop that lid, the bubbles pop up, right?
Uh-huh.
And the whole idea there is that we might flatline, or we try to ignore it or push it away, but
Hmm.
just out of nowhere that bubble pops up and goes, oh, there's a memory or there's a feeling, and I don't like that feeling, right?
Yeah.
And then it's off to the races. Then we're feeling overwhelmed. And I personally lost 100 pounds. Food was a real, I had a serious food addiction, and eating um, lots of Dunkin' Donuts in
Really?
New York City. I had an office that was stressful. Working with gang members is not, it's not the ballet.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like I had a Dunkin' Donuts next door, and they would always just give us food, the leftover donuts for the night, and they would give them to the young kids and things like that. And I just like stuffed my face, and because I was under so much stress. And then like I'm getting bigger and bigger, and so I dieted for 10 years and lost 3 pounds. And then when I started doing my work and working on my own inner wounds and my own inner critic, um, the weight started coming off, and I
Mm.
started getting healthier. And I've seen this, I mean, I would never compare that to someone's, struggle with heroin or meth or something like cocaine or whatever.
Yeah.
But, I would say that, when we can get to these wounds, well, then the bubbles stop bubbling up, and they don't cause us that emotional pain anymore.
Mm.
And then we can start to heal, and we can feel better about ourselves, and we can start to believe better about ourselves. So all these things on that where the beliefs are, we start doing corrective beliefs, and we start working on self-affirmation and self-validation, and then we
Yeah.
work on that inner critic, and we make it more of a positive critic, maybe not even a critic, a positive voice, and then we learn how to cope better. And that's when we get into the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, where now we're working on changing the thoughts as well as learning new behaviors, and then eventually we get the life skills, which I think is very important for guys. And we don't teach enough life skills. I think if I just taught life skills for the rest of my life, that's all I have to do, because there's so many people that just don't know how to live.
I would agree. Yeah. It's interesting to me how many guys struggle with basic day-to-day stuff because it just was never taught to them. So
yeah, I did forget to mention, and I think it's important, I'm going to just try to show it up but I have this, I think it's upside down. The hero's journey. And I use this as a sort of a surrogate 12-step program for a lot of my guys who are really trying to develop an identity. And I'm not going to explain the whole thing because it would take us too long, but there will be other videos on this. So if you guys are interested in any of this, then we will definitely cover it in the next videos. So, but this is a very important part of retelling our story. The narrative about who we are has been, usually with addiction, has been a road of despair and unhappiness and hurt and pain, and we just play the narrative over as if the story never gets any better. But with the hero's journey, I take guys through the actual steps of the hero's journey, and we can rewrite the story of their lives, and we can understand, that there was a purpose for what they were trying to do. So in some ways that they were trying to heal themselves, and maybe they got caught up in, it's like I tell guys, if you drive from Atlanta to New York City, and I've driven that 17 hours a couple times, and it's nice that we have paved roads, but if you all of a sudden you get off on a dirt road and then you're stuck in the mud somewhere, and that's sort of where guys get when they're trying to take care of themselves, or they want to get to a destination, but they end up off in a ditch somewhere, and they just tell that story about, well, I just got off, and my life is ruined. And I'm like, well, actually right now you're in a good place. You're in a place here to restart and retell the story and create a new narrative for yourself. And so that's a definite positive in doing this kind of work for addiction recovery.
Yeah, I love it. Hero's Journey has been a huge tool for myself just in day-to-day life too. So if that's awesome. Something that interests you, just check out this channel. We'll definitely do some content on that, but also go to Google and just check it out there as well.
Right. Absolutely. Some good stuff there.
Yeah. Well, we're about at our limit here. So how would we summarize the topic of addiction, and just on a basic level, like, what are just some things you want to communicate to someone who's just entering this space and trying to learn about it?
Well, first of all, I'm certain if you're watching this video, you probably feel like it's a hopeless thing that you're going through. And I would beg to differ that there is hope and that you can change. And sure, it's not easy to do it on your own. That's why you need to get help. And you may not be able to come to see me in Atlanta. I'm not worried about that. I think you need to find someone. And if you need to find a therapist who understands addiction, you can go on psychologytoday.com, put in your zip code, and look through the profiles. And I would encourage guys to select wisely and really make sure that the person is well-rounded as far as the therapist. But there are a lot of wonderful therapists out there that can do a wonderful job in helping them. But if obviously if you're in the Atlanta area or can get here, then I'm more than happy to connect with you. But don't lose hope and get help. And if you've been thrown out of programs, and I've seen too many guys who have been, don't be disheartened by that, because maybe the approach needs to be different. And this is why I believe that therapy is so important for guys in recovery. And a lot of times these programs aren't really deep into therapy. They're more deep into 12 steps and AA.
Yeah.
And I don't think that AA can go into the depths of a person's emotional unconscious mind and really deal with the wounds. And those wounds are the source of pain. And that pain is what generates the desire to feel better. And that desire is how we cope.
Yeah.
So, so don't lose hope, and don't give up. Find someone
Yeah.
that can understand you and work with you. And,
Yep.
and that's the theme of what I do here. It's like, I don't believe in giving up. All these years of chasing guys on the streets in New York taught me that, not to give up. You don't give up.
Yeah.
And I think that when we can do the deeper healing, then life changes, and life can
Absolutely.
get so much better. I've seen guys change over and over and over again for years. I mean, in wonderful ways. So, and I believe that anybody who's watching this can change if they
Yeah.
really work with someone and, work through this stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love it. I do it with businesses and I do it with men too. So
Yes,
I'm
awesome.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Just,
they should plug into your work too. I mean,
yeah.
the Man Effect. We've had a really good time talking about men's issues, and I think
Yeah.
more men need to talk about men's issues, especially around addiction and
Yeah.
recovery. It's not about the drugs; it's about the issues. It's about what's hurting me, hurting you, hurting everyone. Right?
What's the cause? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. I
Yes.
love that.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you everyone so much for tuning in. If you have questions or comments, just shoot them in the comment box below. Shoot us an email. Do whatever you need to. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you like the content, please share or subscribe. That'll help us a lot. And yeah, I really appreciate you all watching, and thank you for sharing your experience with addiction and how you've been working with men on it. I just really appreciate it. So
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you and all that you do. So, guys out there, if you're watching, please share this, and then also, especially if you have someone in your life a guy who's really struggling with addiction, make sure that you share this information
yeah,
with them.
yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you guys soon, I guess.
Yes. Take care. See you later.
Bye-bye.